on time and get everything done. Now, Adam Silver drops a March 10th date out of thin air, and now you see the players imploding over it. So I want to go on and tell you what else was in this letter, the things that they were claiming. Kelsey Plum and Breanna Stewart said that they are frustrated that we have not made more progress as we near the March 10th deadline, and we believe this is a result of a breakdown in communication between you and the executive committee and players more broadly.
That 3-page letter wasn't a suggestion. It was a cry for help from two of the most prominent players in the WNBA, Kelsey Plum and Breanna Stewart. Both members of the executive committee just publicly admitted they've been shut out of their own negotiations. And the timing? 6 days before the league's March 10th deadline. This isn't dysfunction anymore. This is a full-scale internal revolt.
These proposals. The first proposal that they have seen was in January. I'm also going to hold them accountable in this, because why did it take you until January to fight back? You guys didn't get a reply from the WNBA until after Christmas, after waiting for however long, and that was the first proposal that you had seen through all of this. Yet, so many players, including Breanna Stewart and Kelsey Plum, which, by the way, they have been some of the players who have been the most positive when it comes to speaking to the media and talking about how they want to get back on the court, and they've been just more positive about these CBA negotiations. But you guys have been talking and saying that
Here's what makes this absolutely wild. For months, we've been told the players are united, standing on business, a unified front ready to strike if necessary. But Plum and Stewart just revealed they didn't even see a proposal until January. That means for the majority of these negotiations, two executive committee members had zero visibility into what was actually being discussed. So who's been running this show? Because it's clearly not the players who are going to live with the consequences.
In charge of these negotiations? Who has been writing these proposals? Who is advising the Players Association when they go back with their proposal to go from 30% revenue share to 27% revenue share to 26% revenue share, when you have the WNBA who has said from the beginning that they are not going to do gross revenue? They're not doing it. They've literally said that from the beginning. However, the Players Association continued to push gross revenue. The WNBA said they're not doing it. They offered 70% net revenue. They are working with net revenue. You've heard it from Kathy. You've heard it from Adam Silver.
Watch how she connects the dots here. The Players Association has been making proposals, dropping from 30% gross revenue to 27 to 26, while the league has never budged from their position on net revenue. Not once. Adam Silver and Kathy Engelbert have been crystal clear from day one. They're negotiating within net revenue, which translates to roughly 15% gross. Yet someone kept pushing gross revenue proposals. Someone kept telling the players to hold that line. And now we're learning the executive committee members themselves didn't have the information to question that strategy.
The fact that they've been sitting on this, and now, again, at the 11th hour, with less than 6 days remaining, now you're speaking out about it, like this should have been done sooner. They also requested information like a detailed breakdown of the WNBA's expenses and revenue. To the best of our understanding, a comparative analysis between potential losses players would face in a delayed season or strike-shortened season versus the potential gain achieved in a new CBA earned through continued negotiations, a clear description of how rookie salaries will be structured and how they scale during a rookie contract, information on distributions from one-team partners, and a clear...
This is the part that should terrify every WNBA fan. Plum and Stewart requested basic information that should have been available from day one. A detailed breakdown of the league's expenses and revenue. A comparative analysis of what players would lose in a strike versus what they'd gain from continued negotiations. How rookie salaries would be structured. Information on revenue from league partners. These aren't unreasonable asks. This is fundamental data you need before you can intelligently negotiate anything, let alone a collective bargaining agreement that will define the league for the next 8 years. The letter explicitly states that without this information, the executive committee cannot fulfill its role. And here's the kicker, they said players cannot be expected to engage meaningfully in a process they have largely been excluded from. Excluded. That's the word they used. Not we need more involvement, or we'd like better communication. Excluded.
Negotiating team and the broader membership, ultimately helping to secure player approval of any deal. Without access to the information requested above, the executive committee cannot fulfill this role, and players cannot be expected to engage meaningfully in a process they have largely been excluded from. Like, I don't even know what's going on. What do you mean the players have been excluded from these negotiations? The players are the ones who are directly affected by these negotiations. So that's what I would like to know. I would like to know, is it players in the executive committee who have been withholding this information from other players, or is it truly Terry Jackson and others?
Now think about what this means for the younger players. The ones who aren't on the executive committee. The ones who don't have the leverage or platform that Plum and Stewart have. If two of the most established stars in the league are saying they feel silenced when they try to express concerns, what chance do rookies have? What about the players on minimum contracts who are terrified of speaking out because they've watched the most vocal union supporters tell everyone to save money and prepare for a strike? Lexi Brown went on Threads and said she's well informed. Her anxiety is low because she's under contract. Great for Lexi, but there are dozens of free agents right now who have no contract, no income, and apparently no real voice in negotiations that will determine their entire financial future.
Media, fans online who are saying, who leaked this information? That's what we're worried about right now. We're worried about who leaked the information instead of the well-being and future of the players and this league. Cool. That's what we're worried. Who leaked it? Who leaked it? Come to the front, because you're the real problem, not what is actually happening in these negotiations. I continue. They also said, when we and other players have attempted to express concerns about negotiations, we have been made to feel as though we are acting against the interests of the PA. Many other players across the league feel the same frustrations and have expressed them to us, but feel afraid or unable to speak out. The dynamic has...
The Players Association released a statement after this letter went public. They said they remain united and focused, that their recent player survey reaffirmed the current league proposal isn't worth taking, and every executive committee member signed it, including Plum and Stewart. So either that letter was completely misunderstood, or we just watched two players get publicly strong-armed into signing a statement that directly contradicts what they wrote 24 hours earlier. The survey they referenced asked players if they'd accept 15% of gross revenue in an 8-year deal, or if they wanted the union to keep negotiating. 84% said keep negotiating. But that's not the question Plum and Stewart were asking. They weren't saying take a bad deal. They were saying we need to be involved in the process, we need information, and we need to start negotiating within the framework the league has actually offered. Instead of dying on a hill, the league has explicitly said they won't climb.
Who is speaking on behalf of the 144? Is it one person? Is it a committee who is not on the basketball court? Is it a committee who will not be affected by these salary changes and the net revenue or gross revenue split? Are those the people pulling all the strings? The WNBA is probably sitting there like, not our problem. We've been giving them their proposals. And now the girls are fighting. The two also said that they are concerned about the impact that a standoff or work stoppage would have on the overall financial health of the league and believe it is time to begin negotiating off the league's proposals when it comes to revenue sharing. And that's exactly what I talked about earlier on in this video. Breanna Stewart and Kelsey.
Here's the reality check nobody wants to hear. The WNBA is offering 70% of net revenue, which works out to about a $6 million salary cap. The players are holding out for 26% of gross revenue, which would be a $9 million salary cap. That's a $3 million gap per team, multiplied by 12 teams over an 8-year deal. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars apart with 6 days to figure it out. And the people negotiating on behalf of the players apparently haven't given the executive committee basic financial data to evaluate whether that gap is even closable.
That's the question. I don't think it's a question of if the players want the union to continue negotiating. I think the players just want to be involved. They want to have some say in their destiny and the future of this league. And we have also heard from the players when they come out in the media, we have heard very different answers from different players in the media. Check my last video if you want to hear some responses from Natasha Cloud, responses from Breanna Stewart, Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, Kelsey Plum. They all say something different in the media. That's why we've all been like, doesn't seem like they're all on the same page, does it? And lastly, guys, I want to share something that Lexi Brown posted over on Threads. I'm not really on Threads, but sometimes the thread posts get posted on Twitter. But Lexi Brown said this: well, we, the players who decide to get on the cause, speak to the PA and our updated offer.
So let's put all of this together, because the implications are staggering. First, the internal fracturing. We were called crazy for months when we pointed out that not everyone seemed on the same page. Fans, podcasters, media members who noticed contradictions in player statements were dismissed as trying to divide the union. Turns out we were right. There is fracturing. There are players who feel excluded. There are executive committee members who don't have basic information. And there's a dynamic where speaking out gets you labeled as acting against the interests of the Players Association. Second, the leadership question. Terry Jackson is the executive director of the WNBA. She's not a player. She won't lose a paycheck if there's a strike. She won't face the consequences of a shortened season. Yet she appears to be the primary voice driving strategy, and two executive committee members just publicly stated they don't have adequate information or involvement. So who is Terry Jackson accountable to? Because it's clearly not the executive committee. Third, the negotiating strategy. The league said from the beginning they're working within net revenue. They've never wavered on that. Yet the Players Association kept pushing gross revenue proposals, kept lowering their ask from 30 to 27 to 26%, but never pivoted to negotiate within the framework the league actually offered. That's not standing on business. That's running into a brick wall repeatedly and wondering why your head hurts. Fourth, the timing. Adam Silver set March 10th as a drop-dead date. That's 6 days away as of this recording. The season is likely already delayed regardless of whether they reach a deal, because training camps, free agency, the draft, all of that takes time to organize. But now you have executive committee members publicly revolting with less than a week to go. That's not a negotiating tactic. That's panic. Fifth, the media strategy. The inflatable rat outside league headquarters. The truck driving around with messages for Adam Silver and Kathy Engelbert. The social media clapbacks. Who approved all of that? Because if Plum and Stewart didn't have visibility into basic financial data, did they sign off on those publicity stunts? Or was someone else making those calls on behalf of the 144 players? Sixth, the younger players. This is what keeps me up at night. I think about myself at 22, 23 years old, watching the WNBA and not seeing a viable future because salaries were so low and the league felt unstable. This current generation of players has momentum. They have visibility. They have Caitlin Clark bringing 3 million viewers to regular season games. They have sold-out arenas and corporate sponsors finally paying attention. And they're on the verge of squandering all of it because the people leading their union apparently can't get out of their own way. Seventh, the strike authorization. Remember when the players voted to authorize a strike? I genuinely believe most of them voted yes, because they didn't think it would actually come to this. They thought it was a negotiating tactic, a show of solidarity, not a real possibility. Now it's real. Now they're 6 days away from potentially missing games. And the executive committee members are publicly stating they don't have the information they need to properly advise players on whether a strike is worth it. Eighth, the owner's perspective. The league has been silent through all of this. They're not doing press conferences. They're not releasing statements every other day. They're just sitting back and watching the Players Association implode. That's not an accident. That's strategy. Why would you interrupt your opponent when they're making mistakes? The longer this drags on, the more desperate the players become, the more willing they'll be to accept a deal closer to what the league originally offered. Ninth, the precedent this sets. If the players cave now after all the public posturing, after the strike authorization, after the tough talk about standing on business, what does that do to their credibility in future negotiations? But if they actually strike and miss games, what does that do to the momentum the league has built? Either way, the Players Association has backed itself into a corner where there's no clean exit. 10th, the information asymmetry. The league has lawyers, financial experts, decades of negotiating experience. The players have Terry Jackson and apparently an executive committee that doesn't get basic financial data until months into the process. That's not a fair fight. That's a massacre waiting to happen. Here's what needs to happen immediately. The Players Association needs to provide complete financial transparency to every player, not just the executive committee. They need to bring in independent financial advisors who can explain the real-world implications of different deal structures. They need to pivot to negotiating within net revenue, since that's the only framework the league is working in. And they need to empower the executive committee to actually execute, not just rubber-stamp decisions made by non-players. But here's what I think actually happens. They scramble together some compromise in the next 6 days that nobody is happy with. The season gets delayed anyway because there's not enough time to organize everything. Players spend the next 8 years resenting the deal they agreed to, and in 2033, we do this whole dance again, except with even more animosity and mistrust. The tragedy is that the players deserve better. They deserve higher salaries. They deserve a bigger revenue share. They deserve to benefit from the growth they've created, but they also deserve competent representation. They deserve leaders who give them information, involve them in decisions, and negotiate strategically instead of emotionally. Right now, they're not getting any of that. So where does this leave us? With a league in chaos, 6 days before a deadline. with executive committee members publicly revolting against their own union leadership, with younger players terrified to speak out, with a negotiating strategy that's been doomed from the start, and with fans like us watching the WNBA's biggest opportunity in decades potentially slip away because the people who are supposed to be protecting the players' interests can't get out of their own way. If you're a WNBA player watching this, I genuinely feel for you. You're stuck between a league that's offering less than you deserve, and a union that apparently can't negotiate effectively on your behalf. That's an impossible position, but at some point you have to ask whether the people representing you are actually serving your interests, or just their own. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think the Players Association can salvage this, or is this negotiation already doomed? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like a complete organizational failure at the worst possible time, and the people who are going to pay the price aren't the ones who created this mess.